Let's see if the marker actually works. Yes. Okay, just turn our hand. We're going to talk today. I was asked to talk about the attributes of Allah, and you all know the famous hadith. What's the famous hadith about 99 names? You know it? You don't? Who knows it? Like, who can say it in English? Allah has 99 names, and whoever gets them all or whatnot enters paradise. Okay, so that's the sound part of the hadith. The hadith goes on in Tirmidhi, so the sound part stops there. There's another version of the hadith where the hadith goes on, related by Abu Hurairah, and it relates 99 names. Okay, and so what do you see all over posters and things? Everybody's seen those before, right? They put Allah and then they put a whole bunch of names all around it. Right? Everybody with me? Okay. First issue that people don't often realize, this is kind of one of the, there's a number of issues relating to this topic that I consider to be historical groupthink. In other words, because it happened to have been done a certain way and people just keep doing it a certain way nobody stops and says, hold on a second, why are we doing it this way when we could do it some other way? The 99 names actually that are in that hadith that people put posters on all over the place, there's actually about 3 different lists of those names. And each one of those hadiths that actually lists the names actually has a bit of a weak chain of narration. So I think that whereas the strong narration stops after where it says enters paradise. So I think basically what you have there is that it's Abu Hurairah tells the hadith and then he gives what he thinks are 99 names. And then people just, oh, okay. And then that becomes the 99 names moving forward. The other thing is that when there's actually several different lists of names, they're mostly similar, but there's a few differences. The other thing that people miss up on or misconfuse the issue is that there's not just 99 names. There's actually more than 99 names or attributes attributed to Allah in the Quran and in Hadith. And what the Prophet Muhammad is simply doing is encouraging us to learn about our Creator. And if you learn a whole bunch about your Creator, you will enter paradise, is essentially what the hadith is saying. Okay, so now how is this topic taught in class usually? You just start going through all those names one by one, and by the time you get, how far down the line until you start forgetting them? How many do you remember? Can you list off the top of your head?
Right now?
Yeah, what do you think? Huh? How many do you think you can list off just very quickly?
Probably 20.
Maybe 20? Okay, so what we have here is, basically the way it's taught is just, here's a name, here's another name, here's another name, here's another name, and you're just going on and on and on, because the hadith doesn't really order them in a logical, connected sequence. It's more connected based on sort of how the words flow. There's a little bit based on the hadith, on the ayah of the Quran, but basically they're sort of how they sort of flow in a way that in Arabic it's sort of easier, slightly easier to remember, basically. But there's no real logical connection between the names. And I think that is an area that we can do better at. Some of these names are inclusive of other names, and some of these names are derivatives of other names. And if you start thinking of the connection between the names, you can actually come up with a relationship which gives you a different way of visualizing. I'm a visual person, I like to visualize things. So we're going to start off with the number 1 name, which is Allah, right? Now Allah, as a name, encompasses all the other attributes. Simple, okay? So there are a bunch of attributes that basically say that mean the one who has all positive attributes. Okay, so sort of derivative concept. Can anybody think of a name like that has to do with encompassing all other attributes? I thought there'd be more give and take here. We made some names, How about?
Jabbar.
Well, Jabbar has to do with power. So what you want is names that encompass all others. So Al-Majid, for example, means one who has all positive attributes. Al-Quddus means all, pure, perfect in all ways, or whatnot. Let me give you a few more. As-Samad So we can put a bunch of names in here that have to do essentially with the completion and perfection of attributes, sort of like like summary names. So a samad, for example, means the one who has got all perfect attributes that everybody is dependent on them, for example. Al-Majid is the one who is all perfect attributes that everyone is praising and, accept, of those attributes. Al-Azim would be the one who is so great that all attributes come, perfection of all attributes and whatnot. Okay, so you can start putting, when you're starting to mentally organize, if you've got 99, just a random list, you'll forget it. But once you start breaking them down into like, what is the relationship between some of these, you'll start remembering. So I know Allah, and Allah has to do, encompasses all attributes, so then let me start thinking about attributes that, that basically say similar things to that. And you can put like 5, 6, 7 different attributes in this category. All right, so when you have branch out from there, there's 3 key aspects. So when you say, okay, Allah has all these perfect attributes, well now there's 3 key areas that that you branch off from Allah. And one is that Allah is, you need 3 things. You need knowledge, you need power, and you need the character, when you're describing a human being, you say the knowledge, power, and then the character of how does the person deal with those attributes, with the knowledge and the power. Okay? So I'm going to now break this off into 3 different subgroups. So the first is Al-Alim. Alright? And then Al-Malik. And then what do you think Allah's key character attribute is?
Rahman.
Ar-Rahman. At least that's my opinion. By the way, this order and categorization is, it's not the only way to think about it, but it's a way I came up with to think about it so that you can help sort of in your own mind organize these names and these attributes of God so you can better remember. Otherwise you'll just be like him where you only remember as 10, 15 and you forget the rest. So, Ar-Rahman. Okay, so let's talk about Al-Alim. Allah. What are some names that are derivative of Allah being all-knowing?
Al-Hakim.
No. Pick another one. Well, actually, Hakim has to do with wisdom and how something is being done. So there are some names that sort of, you could make an argument. That's what I say. This is not the only way. You could maybe make an argument for Hakim, but Hakim generally has to do with how the wisdom in applying something, as opposed to knowledge. What? Alim is up there. No? So, Alim, think about knowledge. If you have knowledge, you know everything, that means you also see everything, right? So seeing is an aspect of knowledge. If Allah knows everything, He's also seen everything, right? So, As-Sami'.
That's all hearing.
That's all hearing, you're right. Sorry, I missed Al-Basir.
Al-Khabir.
Al-Khabir, very good. All aware. How about the ever-present, a shaheed? Shaheed is like a witness, the witness. I don't have enough space, but you get the idea, right? So you can now start categorizing and say Al-Alim is the key thing. Now there's a whole lot of sub-names that sort of relate to an aspect of Allah being Al-Alim. And then you start making a list of them, and so it'll make it easier to remember. Okay? So to add to this list, you could say Ar-Raqib, the one who is close. Al-Shaheed, those are some of the things. All right, so now Al-Malik, so we said this is going to be Allah's knowledge. So now here is Allah's power. So we want all the attributes that relate ultimately to God being the power of God. So with that, can you name some? Anybody?
Musawwir.
Musawwir, no.
Al-Aziz.
Al-Aziz, that's a key one. So Al-Aziz means the one who can enforce his will, the one within power can enforce his will on others. Okay? What's another?
Al-Jabbar.
By the way, feel free to throw them out in English, because maybe you don't know Allah's names in Arabic, and that's fine. I don't want to embarrass anybody. If you know it in English, fine. Jabbar is good, yes. So Jabbar is, again, it's another way of essentially saying the one who enforces his will on everybody else, which basically means you're all powerful, right? So the all power of God. There. What are some other ones that I tell you? You're going through, I can see you, going through the 99 names in your head, right? Da 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 da, al-Malik al-Qudus as-Salam, nah? Well, Ahad is the one, right? I would put Ahad up here if it was me. If I was organizing these, I would say the Ahad means, again, the one that has all attributes. So I'm going to put this up here as the dominant, it encompasses everything. Here is God's knowledge, God's power, and then God's mercy, and aspects of God's mercy. Yes?
Al-Power, Al-Qadir.
Al-Qadir, very good. Al-Quddus is the one who is pure of any imperfection. So if Allah is pure of any imperfection, that means Allah has all attributes, and so that's sort of a top-level attribute.
Would you put an awwal at the top as well?
Okay, I had some, again, you can debate a lot of this stuff. This isn't meant to be this is the only way to think about it. This is just a way to think about it. The way I would think about it, awwal, some names have several aspects to them. Awwal and akhir can relate to Allah's knowledge, because Allah is the first and the last, so that means that, Allah knows everything because He's the beginning and the end of everything. But it can also mean be relating to God's power, because God is the first and the last, and everything else is derivative of His power. So there. So you could, as you think about this stuff, put an attribute in between. You know what I'm saying? And say, okay, this is sort of a combination of power and knowledge, and you get al-awwal and al-akhir. So you can make it more complicated. Actually, I would like to see if somebody can turn this. Once we finish, I show you the whole thing. If you can turn this into a little YouTube video or something, a 10-minute kind of thing, you will help people. If they have a visual way of understanding and organizing things, they will remember things, you'll learn things much better. So that would be a cool challenge for somebody to work on. All right, let me give you a few more just very quickly. Al-Qadir, Al-Mateen, and Al-Qawi would also all go under power, Allah's power, because they all in some way or another relate to power. So Al-Qadir is the one who is capable of doing everything, or anything. Al-Qadir is sort of another derivative of that. Al-Qawi is the one who has power to do things. Goes with Aziz, Jabbar, Qadir, all of those. Al-Malik, Malik al-Mulk, I would also put it here. So the two parts to power. Power has to do with the fact that God owns us. Malik al-Mulk owns us, therefore He has total power over us. Over everything, actually, all of creation. All right, so then we have Ar-Rahman. No? Mateen is another word. Mateen, if I were to, in English, you would talk about toughness, like the toughness of metal or something. Mateen is tough, strong, kind of unmovable, unshakable. It's just another. Arabic has a lot of ways of saying the same thing, and that's cool. But we want to be able to sort of organize it in our minds a little bit. So. Now, Ar-Rahman. So now, if you combine these three together, if you combine power, absolute power, with mercy and knowledge, what do you think you get as an attribute? By the way, the very act of thinking about this is a ibadah. You're actually getting good deeds when you're thinking about Allah and trying to understand God better. So, when you're trying to think about organizing the attributes of God, if you combine mercy and power and knowledge together, what do you get? Rububiyyah, yes. Now, Rabb is usually translated Lord, but it's basically the merciful application of power. In the sense that Rabb means Allah takes care of us, takes care of all creation, raises, provides food for everybody, takes care of everybody, guides us. So under Rububiyyah, you can have a ton of attributes. The one who guides, the guide, the the light, the now Rahman. I mean, again, you can organize these in a number of ways, but Rabb is going to be under there. Is the divine? He's got both, like all of the forgiveness and power and Ghafur, Ghaffar, Rafiq. Hafiz takes care of us. Halim doesn't come at us too quickly when we mess up. Hadi, Hakim, wise. Mujib, the one who answers. All of those kind of are summed up in Rabb. All right, I'll just quickly finish this up. And now, below that, the last attribute, and again, you can organize these in a number of different ways. The last attribute that I would say between Allah and all of us is Al-Khalaq. Why did I put that one as the very end?
Al-Khaliq is the creator.
Right. Al-Khalaq is the creator, and we represent all of creation, beginning of time till the end of time, represent the expression of Allah's will. So basically from here down, like once you get from Khalaq on, you have the physical representation of Allah's will, which is the creation. All right, so that's just a way of thinking about it. Now, is that interesting? I hope it's giving you a few things. Maybe you've forgotten some of these words and some of this stuff. Now, Al-Khalaq has a number of sub-attributes that sort of are sub to it. Any thoughts on that? I think somebody mentioned one of them. What? Musawwir, exactly. The one who gives form. What's another word? Al-Bari, and what's that mean?
Al-Bari is like the evolver.
The one who brings into existence. Like inventor, brings to existence. Al-Khallaq, so those are all sort of sub to that. Okay. Now so this is one topic. Everybody got this? We're going to move on to the next topic. Next topic that everybody always talks about with names and attributes of Allah, and I'm going to deal with this. It's kind of an interesting thing, but people get stuck. When we study names of Allah, we want to improve our iman, strengthen ourselves, better understand why we're here and what we're doing, right? The one topic that is historically where people get stuck in, and it's like a 1,000-year debate, has to do with certain attributes of Allah that have a physical concept to them. So for example, in the Quran, Allah says, I created mankind with my hands, bi-aidi, okay? There is the attribute of Jamil. Prophet Muhammad says, Allah is Jamil, yuhibbul Jamal. God is beautiful and loves beauty. Qarib, being close. Wadud, being loving. Wajh Allah, the face of Allah and whatnot. A'la, being above. So all of these kind of attributes, there is, historically, was a conflict over the issue. So anybody aware of what the idea behind this issue? Have you heard of this issue before?
Tawheed, sort of.
It's a what?
This is like an aspect of Tawheed.
It's an aspect in that, so when Allah says, I created with my hands, what do you understand from that? Or the thigh, or not the thigh, what is it? The shin will be exposed on the Day of Judgment and so on. So historically there's two directions that people went with that. One is, and if you get like a typical Saudi book out of Saudi Arabia, one of these, they will give you a long lecture no matter which book. They'll always lecture you that Allah has a hand, has a foot, has a this, has a that. In other words, these are all true attributes of God, but they're not like our foot and not like our hand and whatnot, beyond our understanding. So their attitude is to say, this is not figurative, this is literal, and therefore and that's all it is. But yet it's not like anything that we do, all right? This is basically, I think, an over-exaggerated response to another historical side, which was basically to say God has no foot, no hand, no nothing. We're going to throw out all these attributes. Allah doesn't love anybody. Allah is not near anybody. These are all just figurative speech to make the understanding a little bit make these words closer to us in understanding. Okay? I kind of take the attitude that, first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran in which language?
Arabic.
Arabic. And in English, just like in Arabic, there are expressions, right? You say, I'm gonna, kick his butt or something. There's expressions that, and nobody, when you say those expressions, nobody in the room would understand that you're physically going to take your foot and kick them in the butt. You're talking about you're going to beat them up or something. There's different ways. So basically, when these expressions are used, what is Allah trying to convey to us? Allah wants us to better, understanding it from our perspective. And as far as to what degree they relate to Allah, well, that's beyond our understanding. But as an expression, when you understand, what do you understand when somebody says, it's very simple and easy. What do you understand when somebody says that Allah is beautiful? What would you understand from that?
That Allah is something that if we were to see him, we wouldn't be like, ugh. We'd be like, whoa.
Well, when someone is, okay, what is beauty anyway?
It's something that
Pleasing to
the
the eye.
eye wants to,
Is it just the eye?
or it's something that we are
To all
drawn
senses.
towards.
It's something that we are drawn towards.
We're
It's
attracted.
something that we're attracted to. Okay? So it's very simple. If somebody says God is beautiful, well, God is something that is attracting to us, is pleasing in balance. There's a balance, there's a symmetry to Allah's attributes and whatnot, and that there's that. Now, to what degree there may or may not be anything beyond that, well, we have to stop at the level of our knowledge, right? We know that laysa kamithlihi shay', but we also know that Allah has given us limited knowledge, and we stop at where we know. What we know is that we understand these words. When you say that Allah is qareeb, what that means is that Allah is going to be very close to you in answering your dua. I mean, that's the practical thing that we understand from that. If Allah is physically here or there or whatever, that's beyond our knowledge and something we just stop at the limit of our abilities. So when you say Allah is wadud, loving, so what does that mean for Allah to be loving? Like practically speaking, what does that mean? What do you do when you love somebody? You take care of them, right? And you take care of them in a very close sort of way. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes care of us in a very close sort of way. And that to me is the extent of what Allah wants us to understand from these words. Allah did not, when Allah says, I created with the hands, Adam with hands, He wants to tell us that He is close to us. It's like from His own, He took an active, He of course created everything actively, but He's verbally expressing how close a connection Allah has with us. And that to me is the limit of what we understand. Everything else, leave it to Allah. So with that opens up a whole bunch of ways of understanding and talking about this stuff, so that it actually increases your faith and in your iman, rather than saying like all these things are sort of trick words to say, Allah has a hand or a foot. I mean, that's not what the words were meant to be conveying. I don't know why we got, as a Muslim ummah, we got into that side tangent, debating and discussing. Just what do you understand from it? And stop at the limit of your knowledge. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so that's one quick thing. All right. Does everybody get that? Are you talking? You have questions about it?
I was just curious if you guys like, so this means like he doesn't have a specific orientation, like he's not available. It's just like a modern Muslim.
Well, the answer, traditional answer, and the Quranic answer is laysa kamithlihi shay'. There's nothing like unto him. So is he like a male? No. Is he like a female? No. Is he like, there's nothing in our experience, that is similar to God.
So, yeah, I've never like read the.
Okay, that's fine.
So they never say like, Allah made you in Allah's image. Which is crazy.
Right. I like that you brought that up. Let's get into that issue. Let's talk about that. Okay, so we talked about this. All of this is cool, but at the end of the day, none of this matters that much. And I'll tell you why. Now we're going to get into the stuff that actually really matters, I think. I mean, this is important. You need to have this as a foundation piece. But at the end of the day, what's really important is when you say Allah is Ar-Rahman, the merciful, for example, or any of those attributes, are they infinite attributes? Like, is Allah perfectly merciful with absolutely everybody under the sun? Or forgiving with absolutely everybody under the sun? If you turn on the news, you see a heck of a lot of, people are dying, suffering, all kinds of stuff, right? So that's where people get confused, is they say, well, look, you're saying that God is all perfectly merciful, all merciful, but then look at how much evil there is in the world. God is perfectly good, and look at all the suffering in the world, all these people having problems and everything else. And so they say, well, therefore there's a disconnect. God must be bad to be allowing this or whatnot. So I want you to think about the difference between the perfection of an attribute versus the infinite nature of an attribute. So for example, if somebody is giving, you can be infinitely giving, meaning I'm going to take every person I meet, I'm going to give as much as I can until they say no. Well, if you are infinitely giving, you can actually give to the point that you harm the other side, right? But if you are perfect in your giving, you give only so much as the other side will benefit them, for example. Does that make sense? So there is a perfection of an attribute is the balance between an attribute and another attribute. And as opposed to the infinite nature, because whenever you say that God is got infinite justice, that's actually incorrect. Let me show you why. What is justice? What is justice? I have no idea. What is justice? Fairness. But how do you decide? What's the symbol of justice? The scales. What's the scales symbolize? Balance, right? So justice is creating balance, right? So if Allah was perfectly just, perfect balance between Him and His creation, what would happen? What would happen if Allah wanted to perfectly create balance between Him and His creation? We'd all be punished. None of us could make it, right? So Allah is not perfectly adl in that sense, in an infinite sense, of perfect balance and justice with absolutely everything. Allah is perfectly balanced between people, but not necessarily in this life. So you have plenty of people, jerks, and thieves and murderers and whatever, that do all kinds of things in this life, and they get away with it, right? So it's understanding the limits and the extents of how does these attributes balance with each other. That's where you're really starting to understand Allah, or God. And if you're just simply knowing the words, oh, God is Ar-Rahman, well, you don't really understand what's going on until you understand the balance between Rahmah, God, mercy, and other attributes. It's the interrelationship between attributes that gives you real understanding of God and how God works. Okay? So what she was talking about was the relationship now between man and God. And I'll relate to this idea of God being created in our image that the Christians have. This is actually an idea that leads many people, I'm going to get it now very practical. Why do a lot of people go astray from God? They say, I don't believe in God. God's mean, He's bad, look at all the stuff He's done to me and my family or whatever, therefore I'm not going to believe in Him because, whatever. If you take that attitude towards God, you have an understanding of the relationship between us and God. If you understand God as a part of the Bible expression of, lots of Christians have different views of the Bible, but the perspective of man as being the son of God, what does the word, or the children of God, what does child imply? If you have a child, what does that imply? Right, but more than that, what do you owe the child something? You don't owe your child something? Hold on a second. What do you think?
When I say you don't owe them nothing,
You do owe them something, exactly. So what do you owe your child?
Shelter.
Shelter.
Love.
See, the women know.